Imagine you're trying to make a welcome sign, and you make the sign look perfect. Immaculate spacing, thin margins, and then you realize that a big part of your population speaks Russian, so you try to fit "Dobro pozdravit" on there, and oops, looks like it doesn't fit. Or what about Chinese? Now there's too much space. Or what about German, French, Korean, Spanish? And now imagine you have hundreds of these signs, and all of them need to be adjusted constantly and look good. And you've just seen one of the biggest UX and UI challenges in history, not breaking a website when it switches to another language. So how do UX and UI designers deal with this? Well, it's actually a little more complicated than you think. So let's simplify the subject by just focusing on one country, Canada, a legally bilingual English-French country, and 3 major challenges which all stemmed from bilingualism in Canada isn't just a suggestion, it's the law. The Official Languages Act makes it mandatory for all federal services to be available in both English and French, and that shapes how UX and UI designers have to approach everything. It's not just about swapping out words for translations. Designers need to make sure everything runs smoothly in both languages without messing up the design. Take Canada.ca, the official site of the country, as an example. Every single page on that site has to work perfectly in both languages. The tricky part? French translations are often a lot longer, sometimes by 10 to 20%. So a simple submit button in English suddenly becomes soumettre in French, with 3 extra characters at the end. If you don't plan for that, it can throw off the whole layout. And if you mess this up, the consequences are no joke. Air Canada learned the hard way when they lost a ton of money and customer trust over their poor French language services. So how exactly do we make sure we don't end up like Air Canada? Languages are made of letters, and those letters displayed on your computer are called typefaces, or in more formal terms, the science of typography. The easiest way to solve the problem is how platforms like Shopify have addressed it, using built-in scalable fonts and dynamic layouts that automatically readjust the sizes of stuff on the screen so the website works the way it's intended to, whether you're reading it in English or French. And from a technical standpoint, scalable fonts rely on relative units like em and rem instead of fixed pixel values. These units allow the font size to change in proportion to the parent container or the root element of the web page, adapting dynamically to changes in screen size or resolution. CSS media queries also play a crucial role here, allowing the website to detect the user's device characteristics, such as screen width, height, and orientation. Once detected, the media queries trigger specific styles that adjust the font size, weight, or spacing to maintain a consistent appearance and usability across all devices. This combination of relative units and media queries ensures that no matter whether the text is in English or French, and regardless of the device being used, the text remains readable and aesthetically pleasing. However, dynamic layouts can only work for so much text. Too many lines or paragraphs of text and the entire thing breaks again as these differences start to pile up. This is best seen on the Canadian Museum of History website, where not only are French titles longer than their English counterparts, but the explanations in French are also longer, often way longer, which may result in text being squished down extremely uncomfortably. In this case, adaptive layouts powered by CSS Grid and Flexbox are the underlying technologies that help maintain consistency. CSS Grid creates 2-dimensional layouts that can automatically adjust in both rows and columns as content changes, ensuring that text-heavy French translations don't disrupt the overall structure. Flexbox, on the other hand, works in a single direction, either a row or column, allowing individual text elements to adjust their position and spacing dynamically. These layout techniques ensure that text doesn't overlap or become too compressed, while making efficient use of white space to keep the design balanced. This is where adaptive typography comes in, a system where the computer automatically tweaks font sizes and line spacing, making sure both languages fit well without looking cramped. But even more important than that is responsive typography, which adjusts all the minute little details at the end to make sure the type shows up correctly. Studies even show that font size directly impacts how well people can understand what they're reading. Skip the Dishes really gets this right. They use responsive typography so that switching between English and French doesn't mess with the flow. The content stays neat, readable, and visually appealing, no matter the device. Websites typically manage this by using a combination of JavaScript alongside CSS to add an additional layer of responsiveness. JavaScript can dynamically measure the user's viewport dimensions and apply the appropriate font size in real time without requiring a page load. This dynamic responsiveness is key for ensuring a smooth user experience when switching between English and French, as the script can instantly detect changes in layout or device orientation and adjust the font size accordingly. This approach minimizes any interruption to the visual flow, keeping the experience seamless. But words are just one part of a language. What about tone? Speaking of, thanks so much for all the support on the channel lately. It really means a lot, and I want to give something back to you guys. So do you need a job? That sounded a bit weird. But whether you're a UX designer, app developer, freelancer, or just a curious viewer, I want to get to know you guys, share some UX and UI tips, and maybe even get a gig. So I made a Discord channel for us and want to make this the place to be for front-end professionals. And I'm having talks with people to get some employers in there so you can connect with them too and find some jobs in the future. I'm really excited to get this thing started, so I hope you'll join me. Cultural expectations between English and French speakers in Canada go way beyond just translating the text. In Quebec, for instance, French speakers usually expect a more formal, structured tone, especially when dealing with government services. But if you head over to other parts of Canada, English speakers tend to prefer a more laid-back, straightforward style. From a UX design perspective, achieving these different tones requires more than just picking the right words. Designers often use natural language processing, or NLP, tools to assist with translating not just the text itself, but also the tone of voice. NLP can help identify culturally appropriate ways to phrase content, ensuring that the translated version feels natural and native to the audience. This way, designers don't need to rely solely on manual translation. Instead, they can use AI-powered tools to ensure that each version of the text fits the audience's expectations. Nowhere is this better exemplified than the Régie de l'Assurance Maladie du Québec, or RMAQ, website. The formal tone used in the French version needs a different touch compared to the relatively more casual style on government sites in places like Alberta. Designers have to make sure that each interface feels natural and culturally relevant for whoever is using it, while also juggling the challenge of making both of these tone differences fit on a page comfortably, which requires some thoughtful translation and some more powerful versions of the tools we talked about before. Another not-so-technological tool used here is A/B testing. By running different versions of a web page with varying tones or language styles, designers can gather data on how users respond to each version. It's simple, but it works. This feedback allows them to fine-tune the tones of the website, ensuring that it resonates with the target audience. A/B testing can also be used to assess how different colors, fonts, and layouts affect user engagement across different language versions. And it's not just about the words. Things like color and layout play a big role too. For instance, color psychology can change how users feel. The color red, for example, might signal excitement in one culture, but caution in another. These subtle differences matter more than you'd think, and understanding them is key to creating designs that really click with users from both language groups. And to effectively manage these cultural nuances, designers often utilize color theory tools that help select culturally appropriate colors based on the target audience. For example, platforms like Adobe Color CC enable designers to experiment with color schemes and preview how different cultures perceive them. Furthermore, accessibility testing tools ensure that the chosen colors are visually distinguishable for users with color vision deficiencies, further ensuring that cultural nuances don't interfere with the design's usability. The use of CSS variables is another vital aspect, allowing designers to dynamically change the color scheme depending on the selected language or cultural preference. These variables simplify the process of applying different color palettes without requiring a complete redesign, unless of course you haven't made your website accessible enough. Accessibility can be a challenge on its own, but throw bilingualism into the mix and it gets even trickier. And like bilingualism, the Accessible Canada Act mandates that digital platforms are fully usable for people with disabilities, whether they're browsing in English or French. So designers have to think about things like screen readers and voice instructions working perfectly in both languages. And it's not an optional extra. So if designers want to achieve this, they rely heavily on assistive technology tools that comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. These tools ensure that both the English and French versions of a website are fully accessible to users with visual, auditory, or cognitive disabilities. Developers often use WCAG testing software to check for issues like insufficient color contrast, missing alt text, or unlabeled buttons that screen readers rely on to interpret a site. Additionally, keyboard navigation must be implemented so that users who cannot use a mouse can still easily navigate the site in both languages. Take OC Transpo's public transit system. Visually impaired users rely on voice instructions, which have to be spot on in both English and French. A mispronunciation or awkward phrasing in either language can cause real confusion, so it's critical that designers test thoroughly to make sure everything is clear and smooth. Not only that, but accents may differ, voice volumes may differ, and maybe someone is trying to practice their French with the machine, but their French is awful. The machine has to deal with all of them. This is where advanced speech synthesis technologies come into play. Voice recognition and text-to-speech, or TTS systems, need to be fine-tuned not just for multiple languages, but also for regional accents and dialects. Designers work with machine learning algorithms to teach these systems how to recognize variations in pronunciation and phrasing. For example, Québécois French has distinct phonetic features compared to Parisian French, so TTS systems must be trained with voice data from native Québécois speakers to ensure accuracy. This makes sure that when users request directions or information through a voice-enabled platform, the machine can handle a wide variety of linguistic inputs and accents without miscommunication. On speech-to-speech, there's also screen readers, visual-to-speech. These tools need to switch between English and French without skipping a beat. But things get even trickier when you factor in regional dialects. You know, like when we're dealing with Quebec. To address this challenge, designers often use technologies like ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Applications, which provides additional context to screen readers and helps them interpret more complex elements on a web page, such as dynamic content or language shifts. ARIA labels help screen readers announce language switches smoothly, notifying users when they've moved from English content to French and vice versa. On top of this, language detection algorithms are used to ensure that the correct pronunciation is used when reading out French words with their respective regional nuances. Without these additional layers of technology, screen readers would struggle to provide accurate and seamless experiences across bilingual platforms. And there you have it. Bilingualism, what used to be a niche subject, has turned into a requirement in the modern world. We only talked about Canada here, but these methods are used all over the world to address language differences, whether it's dealing with differently sized words or if someone reads right to left instead of left to right. Thanks for watching.